Welcome to the Sales Readiness podcast brought to you by SBI. Each episode features an unfiltered conversation between our host, SBI's Managing Director, Ray Makela, and an industry expert about strategies, skills, and solutions that drive sales performance to the next level. These conversations are packed with expert advice, real-world examples, and practical tips to help sales enablement leaders to close deals, lead teams, and outperform the competition. In this episode, Ray is joined again by Stefano, Senior Training Consultant at SBI, to debrief on their experience at the recent Gainsight Pulse conference. The two dive in to unpack the key trends shaping the future of customer success and explore what enablement leaders should be prioritizing to deliver outcomes-based value.
All right, and welcome to the Sales Readiness podcast. Again, I'm Ray Makela, Managing Director of the Talent and Training Business, joined again here by Stefano, and really thrilled to do a quick recap on a conference we were at in Las Vegas last week. It was my first Pulse conference. Annie, I'll let you share how many times you've attended as a veteran, but maybe we could start and just jump in. Can you talk a little bit about, why Pulse, what it was all about, and specifically why you're wearing a crown today?
Well, thank you, Ray. Nice to be on here again. So I actually did the math. I think I was wrong in our conversation, but I think this is my 8th year, not consecutively, but 8th year attending Pulse. And I believe they started in 2013 or 2012 as like a precursor tester. But the benefit of Pulse is it's a leader in the CS space, Gainsight is, and they developed this community event that they host annually in 2 different areas, actually. So you'll have Pulse Europe and you'll have Pulse Domestic here in the USA. And this is really an exciting community event where they bring the CX and post-sales space or professionals together to actually gather and not only review, obviously, Gain Suite, product suite tools, but also talk about industry best practices, operations, functionality, and really provide insight into success trends, studies, and evolutions in our space. So it really is an essential, event where we can all gather and really not only feel both validated, but also inspired as to what's to come and what's evolving in our role. And then the theme couldn't be more appropriate. Every year there is one. But hence my crown. The theme this year was a spiff off of Wicked and thinking about, are 2 sides to our customer journey and how they blend together. And that all went really well with our theme and the topics we'll likely talk about today.
Yeah, I thought they did a really nice job pulling it together, and even thinking a little bit about AI and how it kind of is the wizard behind the curtain. So a lot of metaphors, a lot of ways to expand that conversation. I was just blown away. I mean, 2,500 professionals all focused on customer success and improving that journey and thinking about ways to cross-sell, upsell, get renewals, kind of really complete the whole value chain. So I thought extremely well done. Let's dive in. I mean, can you talk about what were some of the themes that stood out for you today at Pulse or last week? What did you take away from the conference?
Yeah, I mean, so many takeaways. I think that's also one of the key pieces when attending events like this. Luckily you and I had each other for, teams that have the ability, when you bring people together, you can kind of divide and conquer and then create a recap space, which you saw a lot of teams doing at lunch or in the expo hall, being able to share key takeaways because there's so much you can learn, across over 100 sessions essentially on 2 days. Some key themes that actually stuck out with me, and I think professionals in this space, were about 3 or 4 different areas. One of which was the power of customer education and community. It's always been something that has been important in our field, but only in the last couple years has there been this customer education focus and the idea that community can help solve a lot of frontline reactive tier 1 problems that, customer success managers and professionals alike may feel like they're spending a lot of time doing with their customers. So how can you better leverage customer education resources and build a community around self-learning and learning from your peers? And, it's no secret that Gainsight recently acquired SkillJar, which allows them to do that much stronger than before. And so the idea of, you know, blending the two together and creating a community that can help adoption and growth without you even being involved with the customer is just such a realistic way to increase and strengthen your operations, right? And then for CSMs to actually leverage those resources in the aspect of community as you are supporting your customer through adoption and growth. So, really exciting there. The
Yeah.
second theme that we heard was AI and like this idea of an agentic journey, right? So this is the newer buzzword in the industry that's been around a little bit. And this actually correlates with the theme of Wicked, thinking about taking in we both have good and bad. And, AI is no different, right? So thinking about where can AI actually be built throughout the customer journey, offer almost this racy role ownership, across the swim lanes. And then you're able to provide more strategic, more valuable, high touch points across the roles in each swim lane. And then the journey's even stronger than before. And so, where can AI agents actually increase efficiency and add more value to those high value moments
Yeah,
for
I thought that was really impressive. I mean, the idea that, let's leverage AI as a teammate to do some of those mundane or repetitive tasks and help us, create better insights and be more prepared for those, quarterly or executive business reviews. And even to your point of customer education, leveraging everything that's happened prior to create bespoke training for that customer to say, hey, we can help you solve this problem. And here's what it's going to look like. We spend a lot
Mhm.
of time thinking about training our customers on how to improve that and then pulling that through. So how can they train their customers? Because if they do a better job onboarding and taking care of them, then obviously the renewal and expansion conversations, become a bit easier. I mean, that's the goal.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, part of the conversation too, right, is you have to operationalize these AI agents to work the way you want them anyway, or to access the data that you have. And so that also takes a step in just reflecting, do do my tools work the way that we want them most basically? Is our data clean enough that AI agents can actually use clean data to make those great predictions and offer those great insights? I
Yeah.
think that's another important thing here that is really necessary as an executive team or as leaders to really assess, because that ultimately is also going to add that value back to your client facing, team members or even those backstage, right? And,
Yeah.
you got product and dev that can benefit from AI agents too. So I think it's necessary and it brings
Mhm.
value back, right, into the roles. And we all want more strategy. We all want customers to feel like they're having these high touch moments, and the only way you can give that quality back is if you give time back to roles like CSMs. And that's the biggest thing. Accounts are growing, loads are larger than ever, products are getting more complex. So the more that you can offer time back to really take a look at how customers are using them uniquely, the better, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And I think that's really hit home. Um, and then that actually led to the last point, which was building like a value or outcomes based journey or a customer experience if you're not already doing that. All the more reason to. It's not enough just to have milestones of adoption or consumption. That's not enough to say a customer is getting value out of your product. So you now need to switch from just basic adoption consumption metrics and really think about key milestones that are showing that value is being achieved and completed. And so, how is it really changing their line of business? How are your products and services actually impacting their customers, right? Or their revenue goals. And so the more that you tie value back into how your journey is operating that way and your roles and swim lanes are, contributing to that experience, then the stronger you are seen as a competitor in the market. Because not all operations or companies are doing that. So that will make you stand out from the rest of their tech stack.
Yeah, and certainly leveraging tools and AI and other things to make that more evident, more real time. I mean, it shouldn't be a once a year kind of thing and then it gets forgotten. And
Mhm.
so I love that theme of, hey, let's build it into our process. Let's have access to that information and continue to
Totally.
remind our clients, this is what we're doing. This is how we're partnering and working together.
Yep.
No, I thought that was a really interesting insight. Let's talk about. I mean, I was really impressed with the Gainsight leadership team, the production, everything that they did to put this on, and also, just sharing kind of how the industry is evolving. Can you talk a little bit about that? What are leaders looking for these days? How is that changing? As CX and CS continues to evolve.
Yeah, what we're finding and, between the sessions and attending like you and I had the pleasure of being able to do, and then also networking and talking to leaders in the space from events like this, what's evident and clear is that leaders are needing to evolve their teams as their companies mature, their teams need to mature. So more than ever, as we all know, when we start organizations and we're early startups, that skill will matrix idea, we're just trying to get people in the door that maybe have industry experience with the products or services that our organization built, but not necessarily the skill or experience on growth or strategy or revenue driving. So you're seeing leaders actually try to mature and level up their teams to not only be product smart, but now also revenue thoughtful, right? And so the idea here is that leaders are needing to really focus on resource allocation differently because now there are AI agents. I mean, that's the good and the bad, right? There are ways that AI agents are taking pieces of our role maybe away to benefit us long term. So now, as we look at resource allocation and maturing our team, what does the role look like? What are those responsibilities we need them to have? And if we don't have in-house enablement, professional services, or ways to grow our team to match our organization's maturity, then what do we need to mature them, and upskill them and level them up into thinking and being and acting more strategic with our journey and our experience? How do we move them from just, adopting our product to now how are they getting value? And so sometimes that requires a different evolution on the team that maybe the leader can't serve individually. That's where teams like SBI and our programs can definitely help, but how do we move our team through maturing and matching our organization's maturity and as we evolve? And that's one of the biggest themes I think I heard talking to leaders over those 2 days.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, really, really interesting. On that theme, integrating the team more, having them understand the value and really thinking about CS as part of, I mean, it is, but part of go to market and part of the value chain. Can you talk about that a little bit more? How are you seeing that integrated into being a growth driver, being really part of that revenue engine?
Mhm. Well, I think it's being honest as an organization that the experience is owned by everyone. I think that mindset, while it's definitely evolved and increased over the last few years, I think that from what we've seen, it needs to continue. And then the idea of really looking at, which I loved on day 2, the opening keynote really talked about, we have all of this support for pre-sales. We have renewal specialists. We have solution engineers. We have a whole entire built out function to support prospects. But when we look at the data, it costs 6 to 7 times more to get one prospect, one new customer than it does to retain, right? And so the idea here is we kind of need to mirror the support and the systems that our pre-sales, side of the house has into post-sales. Post-sales needs also those renewal specialists for, expanding and renewing clients, bringing value back that way. Um, because the likelihood of us actually getting anywhere up to 25 times more revenue just from looking at 10% of, let's say, my own book of business, that's a lot more money on the table we're keeping, right? The potential of growth and expansion is so huge. So I think the value needs to also come back. We need to mirror those resources. We need prospects. We need new logos, hands down, no question. But then once we have them, we need to continue that same mirrored strategic support, especially if our CS team is not owning the renewal transaction, but they're owning the renewal outcome through adoption, then we need to give the same suite of services our pre-sales teams has. And that will help to show and continue that value back, especially to board members and executives, right? Because retention is so impactful and it definitely is a revenue driver.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about everybody owning the customer journey, I think it's one of the things, and I mean, our SBI research is pretty clear on that. That unfortunately, as an industry, we continue to confuse our clients with too many people calling on them, too many
Mhm.
messages, not sure what everyone does, and pulling that all together and saying, no, we are all part of the same team. And
Mhm.
literally, let's get on the same page. Here's the page. Let's make sure we're speaking the same language.
Mhm.
I think that's all part of this evolution. One of the other themes you touched on earlier was around customer education, and I know that's an area you're really passionate about. Can you talk about how that's impacting the role and the evolution there? How is that changing?
Yeah, I'm actually really happy to see that customer education is becoming more prevalent in the CX space. Usually it originally as this function of CS evolved, it was just part of a CSM's role. Let's educate our customers within the product, within the experience. And over time, I'm happy to see that it's evolved and now it's really becoming, you know, the the necessary step in order to support models like digital tech touch, even in support of AI agents. I mean, think about it. If you don't have an LMS library of services or even, a help center or robust documentation, how do you expect AI to serve up any sort of self learning or on demand or conditional experiences to support them whenever they need it versus when a CSM is available? Then that's a step you have to make sure that you cover, right? So for those of us in education and enablement, we've always known that the idea of micro learning and how to sequentially stair step content into chunks and called scaffolding, right, is so essential to learners, even adults, to be able to build up how to do a learning outcome. And in your case, it's learning how to use product. So as we're seeing companies mature and CS evolve, PS is or professional services is becoming more and more a function within the CX team. And that is super exciting. Because technology has grown and AI agents are there, there's so many opportunities to make this super smart. And you know me, Ray, I love efficiency. So, professional services or PS teams, it's not just serving your customers. Sometimes we can get too tunnel visioned on customer education is just for our customers, but it goes right back to your team. I mean, in turn, you're enabling your team to be product experts, especially if your product suite is so complex. How else do you expect them to understand your product or be experts in it? Right. And that takes a lot of enablement time in house. You may not have that. So, the more that you branch out and build out your customer education space, the better your team and access to resources do they have to become experts right back. So, there's a lot of opportunity there. And so, it is more and more necessary to consider not only team enablement, but that does impact the customer education function that you may have. And professional services can do that. So,
Yeah.
it's very exciting selfishly, but having done a one to many model before that was even a thing yet, and having to do those videos myself for my, book of business of 150 plus customers, it really will change the game on serving up those concepts and those ideas, or even thinking like compliance. What do customers need to know before they actually roll it out or actually think about turning it on for their, product and their teams? Now, when they're served up that, the CSM can have such a more valuable strategic conversation of how does that actually add the value back to their outcomes, rather than the CSM spending time on, well, here's how you set it up and here's how it works. And those are all things that can just be delivered either by AI agent or, available through education. And so then it really does help the CSM have that value back in their strategic partnership as a leader in the product.
Yeah, and how do you see that evolving? I mean, you talked a lot about AI agents and how that's becoming just part of the process. How does the CSM then complement that? Like, how do you make sure we're taking advantage of those things, but also doing those things that humans do well, right? And
Yeah.
kind of supporting that.
It's funny, just training a team this week on the idea of, leading and running meetings that are values and outcomes based. I think it goes back to that. I think the more that the customers are served up kind of the foundational understanding of something, whether it's a tool, a report, or a concept, even a workflow, I think then the benefit to the CSM is that next meeting can actually be a meeting of value and efficient time. We see too often, like one of the biggest issues with client facing teams is getting key stakeholders engaged. And engaged can mean opening the right email, engaged can be accepting the EBR or QBR invite, right? Having the right people in the room to help make decisions that will move their implementation or their adoption forward towards their goals. And that's one of the biggest issues. So imagine if they were already served up something that they needed understanding of, then that's kind of out of the way. And the meeting with the CSM is now so specific to their questions about what they were served, or their needs relative to their business. That's where the CSM really brings value because they're all trying to tie it back to how does it make sense for you? And then that way, when renewal conversations or expansion conversations come, then it's much more personal. It's much more intricate to their line of work, their business, their outcomes, and then the product works for them. And that's where those conversations are. I think you'll actually find stronger meeting efficiency. You'll find higher values achieved. At the end, renewals will be easier to have a conversation. You're always going to have negotiations with price or things like that. But I think the ask will just be easier. And at least in my experience working with my clients in the past that way, I found that. It was easier to ask for the expansion. You want to do more? Here's the tool. We have the proof, right? They've seen it. And I think that's where the CSM's role really needs to be moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that's really exciting. I mean, I think we've all had that experience where you're talking to a CSM and you're like, wow, they get us. Like they just understand and they understand our direction and our business. And I think that's, one of the promises of AI is it can help all of our reps kind of come up to speed quicker and have access to that information instead of, muddling around in the data and trying to figure out, what's broken or how we can help. So,
Yep.
Well, just in terms of the last question, kind of pulling it all together. So if you were Glinda, I don't know if you have your magic wand today or not, but if you were Glinda, what would you want CS teams to think about, to consider, to take away as they continue to scale and, add more value to the organization?
Yeah. I don't have my magic wand, but I do have
Okay.
my magic headband, so I'll use that.
Yeah.
I honestly, the Glinda and me would want us in 5 years ahead where CSPs, CRMs, all swim lanes and AI agents are working seamlessly or without seam, as product likes to say.
Yeah.
Where CSMs can actually really be strategists. But if I had to pick something, I would say organizing or operationalizing your tools. I think the biggest critical need, unfortunately, still is that all these tools talk and give the right data to be available for the CSMs or the client facing teams. There still needs to be work there. And so, in order for all of those to work together, your data needs to be good. If your data is not good, then you can't do all the things to help automate, to make those agents run, to give more armor for the CSMs to know exactly who their client is. And that's critical. If you don't have your tools working in the way to support them, then none of this will really work well, right? So operationalizing the tools is a big one for me looking forward. And then, like we talked in the beginning, upskilling your teams is critical. There's always going to be a skill gap on your teams. It's an ongoing thing you'll have to address. You cannot train your teams on year one and expect them to operate, at the maturity of your organization or the needs of your product or customers on year 3 without any additional training on that evolution. So continuing to offer your team the ability to grow professionally will not only improve your retention, but it will also improve how they're supporting your customers moving forward, how they're using your tools operationally, internally, and, really understanding the customer even more, which is ultimately what you need to be. So I think those are going to be things that if I could wave my magic wand, upskill your teams and
Right.
operationalize your tech stack.
No, I think so. More work to be done there, but I think it is an exciting opportunity to really think about that as one of the growth drivers. Let's invest in it. Let's shine a spotlight on it. Let's make sure they have the skills and the tools and everything they need to be successul and get through that. That pull through revenue. So I think that's a great place to wrap it for today. Thank you very much, Glinda, for joining me today, AKA Annie. Really a pleasure. Enjoyed, being at the conference, learning a lot from you and from all of the sessions. And look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good day.
Bye.
You've been listening to SBI's Sales Readiness Podcast with Managing Director Ray Makela hosting. Visit sbigrowth.com to read SBI's latest research, join upcoming events, or learn about SBI's GTM training services. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and connect with us on LinkedIn.